Hello artists! So I am doing a demo on a video on YouTube just because of social distancing in the class. So as we go, I'm going to pause or you friends should pause after I get done doing each technique, and then you practice, and then you can push play to move on to the next one. So you're going to do them with me. Pause your video after I get done with each technique. So I'm trying to show right here how not to tap like that with your paintbrush because you're going to splatter and you're going to ruin your artwork. You want to wipe it gently on the side. Keep that hair on the paintbrush having a good day. And then swirling your paintbrush into your watercolors to wake the color up. Don't smush them. We don't want to throw these paintbrushes away. We cannot replace them. So keep them nice and neat. Be kind to our art materials. Rule number 3. Okay, so wet on wet, resist, splatter, salt, Saran Wrap, dry brush, wet on dry, and then free space for your whatever you'd like to do. So I'm getting my paintbrush clean by kindly using my paintbrush and my water, not making a mess. And the first one is wet on dry, so I'm going to make sure my paintbrush is nice and clean, and then getting my spot wet, like an invisible wet spot onto your paper where you want the paint to go. So I'm making like a little rectangle or square. And then once it's nice and wet, you're going to wake up that color that you want, any color, and then just rub it on there. And you can see it blends so nicely. So this is a good technique for blending or doing a gradient. Okay. It's wet on wet. You can use any color you'd like. I just chose red. I changed my colors up. So making sure my paintbrush is nice and clean. Oh, I decided to do a little blending with orange and red, see how that works together. I'm experimenting as you should today too, okay? So once I'm done with this, now it is your turn to pause the video. I'm walking around, making sure that you friends do this too with me. I want you to pause the video and then do the wet on dry, wet on wet. Okay, now is resist. This is using a white crayon. Now some of you guys have probably done this before or done some of these techniques before with another art teacher, but we are practicing them today for Mystic Core to know where you are at. So I used my white crayon first, and then I wiped my paintbrush off to get clean, to change my color, and then I just threw some color on top of my white marks. The resist, the crayon has wax, so that's why it does not want the color to go on top. Okay, so pause your video and do resist. Next is splatter. I'm demoing this because you friends, I still see friends just whacking their brushes all over the place when they want to splatter some paint, which is fun, but the correct way to do it, I will show you in a second. It's way easier and you can control where your splatter goes a lot more. So I have green on my brush. Now holding my brush like that, I'm going to use my other finger and just tap my paintbrush. And look, I got on a little bit of my salt, but that's okay. I'm starting to move over. And then I can control my splatter a lot more and I'm not making a mess on anybody else or your artwork. That's the correct way to do a splatter. So pause the video and do your splatter. Next is salt. Washing my paintbrush off kindly and cleanly. You can use a paper towel to make sure that your paintbrush is clean too. I am going to just grab and pick a color and paint it on, and make sure that you have it kind of more on the wetter side, because with the salt it's going to want to soak up a lot of that liquid. I'm not saying to soak your paper, but make sure you have a good amount on. And then after you put that down, you can take some salt from me, and you don't need a lot. A lot won't even look that good. You're going to want just a little sprinkle, just like that. And you're just going to take your other fingers and sprinkle it into the spot that you want. And you can already see it's soaking up a lot of that color in liquid. Later, once it fully dries, you can pick the salt off or wipe it off, and then you can get those little dots. Okay, so pause the video, and it is your turn. So free space, I'm going to leave that alone. Wet on dry. Wet on dry. So wet on dry means a wet paintbrush on a dry surface. So I'm getting my paintbrush wet with a color, waking up a different color, and I'm going to leave my surface dry. Okay, and then you just paint away. I'm going to make a little heart. This versus wet on wet, you don't get much blending ability, but you get a lot of control. That is why you can paint things like this. Versus the wet on wet, you can blend so much more. So look at the difference. Wet on wet is a wet paintbrush on a wet surface. Wet on dry is a wet paintbrush on a dry surface. So pause the video and try wet on dry. Next is dry brush. Dry brush is pretty much almost like dry on dry, a dry paintbrush on a dry surface. You're going to want very little liquid on your paper and just mostly the color. So I'm wiping off a lot of the liquid on my paintbrush on this surface on the other side of your watercolor set. And then you pretty much just go for it. This is a good technique for like hair or any kind of like texture. Also, if your other side of your paintbrush set where I just wiped off a lot of that magenta color off, you can take a paper towel and some water and just wipe that clean so you can have a clean area to use that. Okay, pause the video and try dry brush. Next is Saran Wrap. This is a really cool one. So you're going to pretty much do the wet on dry or how we did our salt and get it really wet. Again, not soaking, but wet. Choose a different color and pretty much make a rectangle like I did. And here we go. All right, see, I'm grabbing a little bit more color because I don't think it's enough liquid for it to soak. Okay, and then now I'm going to take a little square or rectangle piece of Saran Wrap. I don't need a lot for this little space because you're going to scrunch it up anyway. So this is about enough for me. I'm going to lay it down and then smush it in, and you can already see some of that liquid building up in certain spots. You're going to want to let that dry for at least 5 to 8 minutes, but longer is good too. So there you go. You may pause the video and try Saran Wrap. Okay, with your long strip today, you're going to do Hue Tint, which is a hue with a white, tone with a gray, shade with a black. Okay, so I split my paper into 4 spaces by in half and then in half on those other sides as well. Do not forget your name. Make sure your name's on the first one too. I forgot to let you know. Okay, hue. Hue is any color on the color wheel, not black and white. I'm going to point to those. Nope, not the black and white. Any other color on the color wheel is a hue. Anything that is a pure color. So you get to choose what hue you'd like to use today for this whole strip, and you're going to stick to it. I'm choosing my teal, and I'm just going to do a wet on dry technique. Wet paintbrush on a dry surface. Just enough so that I can see the color, the original pure color, the original pure hue. Now, with going to tint, I'm going to clean, well actually I'm going to take a lot of that color, that same teal color, and I'm going to put it on the other side of my watercolor set on a clean surface. I'm going to turn it around in a second so you guys can see it better, but I'm going to take a lot of that teal pure hue color that I just used, get it nice and wet, and pick up a lot of that color and put it into one of these squares. Okay, I really want to soak it up. Okay, I'm just pointing to the magenta to let you know that if you do have a big space you want to use, you can just take a paper towel and clean it up with some water. But I'm okay with just using these 2 slots on the left. So again, I'm taking a lot of color. I'm picking a lot of color up because I'm going to need a lot of this color. And then we will start with the hue. So why don't you go and grab a bunch of your color that you choose. All right, now I'm going to clean my paintbrush off really, really well, because for tint, it is a hue plus white. Tint is a hue plus white. So I'm cleaning my paintbrush off, making sure that it's nice, 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 nice and clean, because I'm going to pick up a lot of that white. Oh, I'm checking it on that, and you can see those little teal dots. It was not clean. You can take a paper towel, which I do in a second, and to make sure it's super clean for that white, because we don't want to ruin our white in our paint set. If your white is messed up and full of color, you can take a wet paper towel and kind of just rub your thumb into it to pick up all of that dirty color on top and get underneath to the clean white. Now my white is not clean even when I tried. It is okay if it gets like this, but if it's like super messy, please clean it up with a wet paper towel. Okay, so I'm picking up a lot of that white, putting it on one side of, or a little part of this plastic part of the paint set, and then I'm picking up some of my hue, just a little bit, and then I get a tint. It's just a lighter version. It's where you're going to do your highlights. And just lay it down on your paper. Again, you can pause this as I go, and if I go too fast. So we did our hue, we did our tint, our tone. Our tone is our hue, our pure color, any pure color on the color wheel, plus gray, okay? Tone is gray plus a hue. So I'm actually ready to grab some paper towel because I'm going to wipe up where I used my tint on my water set to mix. You can do this as well with some paper towel too. And if you could guess and use prediction, if tint is our hue plus white and our tone is our hue plus gray, what do you think our shade will be? A hue plus what? Okay, so I'm wiping that up. Easy peasy. Again, you can do it the same with the whole set if you want right away. And I'm cleaning my paintbrush off because I am going to use lots of white again. Lots and lots of white. But then with my black, because how do you make gray? White plus black, right? White plus black equals gray. I'm using a lot of white. But with black, the thing with black in the art world is that you don't need a lot. A lot goes a long way. Okay, so I'm going to show you how I pick up my black. I don't want to wake the color up too much. I'm just going to wipe my paintbrush lightly on the top like that. I don't even roll it around. And then I check to see how much is on my paintbrush. Oh, it's too much, so I'm wiping some off. And then I'm dabbing it into the white to make my gray. Not a lot of black. If you have to restart, grab some paper towel. Then I'm picking up my hue, my original pure color, and I'm mixing it into the gray to make a tone. Once I have that on my paintbrush, I'm going to wipe it and display it onto my tone rectangle. So it's just a tad bit darker, and depending on how much more black you put in there, it could get even darker. Shade. Yep, it is our hue plus black. Same thing with the black. You don't want a lot of black. Black goes a long way. I'm checking my paintbrush to make sure it's clean. It's not clean. I use my paper towel. Okay, I rub my black in there. I don't roll it around. I just wipe it. Okay, checking to see how much I have. I have a lot. I wipe it off. All right, now I'm rolling it on to a clean surface, and then I'm cleaning my brush, checking to see if it's clean. It's clean, and then picking up my hue, my pure color, my original pure color, and going to mix it into my black to make a shade. This is obviously very good for shade areas that are darker, like looking at Wayne Thiebaud's work that we are, those dark blue shades that we saw in his artwork, he used a little bit of black with his blue to get a shade. So that is what I want from you today, are all of our watercolor techniques and our lesson on hue, tint, tone, and shade. Okay, and I'm going to quiz you especially on these hue, tint, tone, and shade. I want you to just know the techniques so you can understand how to paint with watercolors, or if you need a refresher. Okay, here are the techniques. I'm actually going to reveal my Saran Wrap. I could let it stay on for a little bit, but it looks fine. I want to reveal it to you. So that's what it could look like. My salt, I'm rubbing my finger on it. It's still not dry, so I'm going to leave it on a little bit longer. But you can kind of still see the effect that you would get. All right, so that is what I'm asking from you today. And this video is only 17 minutes long. We should be able to get this done today by pausing and going along with me in the video. So, thank you, friends.